Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. The green movement within the commercial cleaning industry has been pretty active over the last 10 years. And in watching the third-party certifiers, the distributors, the users, the contractors, property managers, all the stakeholders in our business, the 101 was pretty product-centric. Everybody was looking at products, and the two major questions that consistently came up is does the product perform, and is the product going to cost me more? So it was all about product, and it was all about the price or the performance characteristics. And a lot of things have matured since its initial beginnings. And so we'll take it from green cleaning, which is kind of a tactical term, moving it more to a strategic environment where we're going to talk about sustainability. We also have to make sure that we identify the financial silos as to where it had the greatest return on the investment as it related to the actual conversions. But a lot of people spent a lot of time changing chemicals, doing training, changing equipment, and it was all for what I consider to be many, many good reasons, and I want to be able to highlight those reasons and then also give you an implementation strategy so that maybe you go back and revisit the topic and perform an assessment or a gap analysis of what you're doing on an environmental basis. Now, some people did it because customers asked them to. Some people, like the universities and the schools, did it more for a corporate social responsibility and making sure that it was a safer environment for students and for children. And so everybody had a different objective and a goal, and I'll try to cover those along the way. Okay, one, in beginning this, the first thing I think is critical, and some of you may have sustainability managers within your organizations, and those sustainability managers, when we talk to them, this is not product to them, this is policy. And so the most important component of any sustainability program is to have a functional policy. These policies can be anywhere from 3 pages all the way up to 30 pages, and they do identify the products, but they also identify the best practices, who's responsible for them. Some of the people on this call, you may be interfacing with buildings that are identified as LEED sites or U.S. Green Building Council buildings. Now, if you're looking at a U.S. Green Building Council building, this presentation has a lot in it that is related to the point structure. Also, if you have a LEED building and you want a presentation on the point structure, Tennant does have a copy of that. It was part of some of the SIMS training because the SIMS standard and the U.S. Green Building Council have worked, ISSA has worked together with them to make sure that the cleaning industry is well represented. So first off is that whatever we do, it has to be cost neutral. It shouldn't cost more. And in some cases, just the consolidation and standardization function drove a lot of cost out of the system. Anything that's related to sustainability is now verified with third-party standards or government agencies that came in and said, here's the criteria, or here's the post and pre-consumer waste on this specific product. The most important thing is along any continuous improvement, if you've already gone through this process, is to revisit it, do a site-based analysis of the products because workers bring products from home. Sometimes people say, well, this area is really dirty, we need something that's non-green, and then all of a sudden you have a lot of creep of old practices and old products. Remember that everything's about policies, and then technical training for frontline workers and supervisors. There are a lot of green modules for that technical training, of which some of the elements of this deck have that built in. And then at the very end, we'll just go through this three-step process. This presentation will be available to you in a PDF form if you would like it. So initially, the government had put into play some federal mandates and regulations as it related to building conservation. There were a lot of studies that were done, and millions of dollars were spent not only on conversions, but actual papers that explained that sustainability had not only benefits, but strong ROIs for commercial buildings. For the sake of everybody on this call, because we're embedded in the cleaning industry, we're the ones that are handling the trash, we're the ones that are using the chemicals, we have the exposure as it relates to the equipment. And so frontline worker safety and occupant wellness was a big part of the green movement. And I'm going to highlight where the financial return on investment came in that was away from the actual products themselves. You have 3.2 million workers within our business, and we talked about this in the safety presentation. And so worker exposure is a big piece. Everything from injuries from the products that we may use or exposure to certain harsh chemicals that we use. And so absenteeism can play havoc on worker productivity. And worker productivity has a lot to do with the total budgets and the cost when you get into the actual workloading numbers. So increasing occupant attendance and wellness, many school districts get funding for attendance levels of students, and certain percentages in each state or municipality may be different as to how they perform the funding. And I'm not saying that sustainable cleaning is going to reduce flu season, but I think that when you're talking about sustainable cleaning practices, safer products, especially in K-12 schools and in universities, my overall feeling is it can have an impact on occupant wellness. Decreasing workplace injuries, these are incidents that are tracked by OSHA. Insurance costs can rise. It can disrupt staffing levels. There can be having to have floaters or replacement workers. That also can have a cost. Containing insurance premiums related to exposure or specific types of risk, enhancing asset life cycles within assets of buildings. Sometimes we see buildings where someone was using a harsh acid and that harsh acid ate the chrome off of fixtures, then someone had to replace the fixture. Or somebody thought that it was a good idea to put bleach in their carpet spotter because it worked better, and someone destroyed $10,000 of carpeting. So sustainable cleaning products, specifically in the chemical arena, can provide many benefits on the financial side. Tenant and occupant satisfaction. A lot of tenants want to be in a healthier environment. They do not want to be exposed to harsh chemistry or anything that would be considered a non-green or non-sustainable practice. And then the actual costs of cleaning operations, once they made this journey, they were able to demonstrate source reduction, product consolidation, pardon me, and also waste diversion, where they set up waste diversion programs or recycling stations within a campus or within a facility or a school district. In educational facilities, not only can frontline workers have asthma, but children have asthma. Now, the statistic when we're looking at EPA's Tools for Schools program, which is a kit that gives a lot of statistics and information, is that about 10 to 15% of children have different degrees of asthma within educational facilities, and they represent the canaries in the coal mine, if we can use that term. And so when these children are around certain types of chemicals within our business, they can experience an asthma attack, or they can have something that's related to chemical sensitivity. And so, as an example, bleach can trigger asthma. And a lot of people, even the Board of Health, recommends bleach for daycare centers, and they recommend bleach for certain types of outbreaks or for facilities. We're very apprehensive to use certain types of chemicals in those environments because we understand the exposure. We also do a lot of audits within schools. And when we're in a school and we see hydrochloric acid or some chemical that's real harsh, it shouldn't be in a building with 6-year-olds. It just represents an unnecessary risk, and it can be an accident waiting for something to happen. There are certainly sustainable products like a citric acid bowl cleaner or even a mild phosphoric cleaner that will do the same job without having that level of risk. But the asthma statistics are pretty high, and that gives, again, a compelling reason for some cleaning operations to look at everything that they're using and make an attempt to go green on 95% of those types of products. Now, indoor air quality originally was a subject matter 20 years ago that started when we started talking about filters on vacuum cleaners. And people said, well, where is indoor air quality today? I said, indoor air quality is now a subset of a sustainable site. And so proper cleaning procedures, These are cleaning procedures that don't stir dust but actually capture it. Products with high VOC levels, as an example, bleach or parasitic acid. Overwetting carpet causing mold growth. Improper mixing of chemicals. There are some vacuum cleaners without HEPA, but in our industry today, 95% of all the machines are CRI certified, and almost 95% of commercial vacuum cleaners have HEPA media in their filtration bags. Mold and bacteria growth. Somebody recently sent me an email and asked me the difference between a non-parabol block and a parabol block. One is a carcinogen and can cause cancer, and one doesn't. Entrance matting to stop soil from coming in to buildings, making sure you have the right types. I believe that the atomization of cleaning chemicals and products is something that can be easily eliminated through training. But the respirating glass cleaner, all-purpose cleaners, disinfectants through using trigger sprayers, even if the chemical is sustainable and it's certified to be green, it has no health benefit to it. And it can affect people that clean, frontline workers, their respiratory systems. So we normally recommend a foam trigger sprayer and or a flip-top bottle, or turning those trigger sprayers to a straight stream. Once a worker has been trained and they understand what's happening when they atomize it, then they have a compelling reason to make sure that it becomes self-regulating and that they're doing it for their own personal reasons. Then you have the off-gassing of traditional deep cell batteries on scrubbers. There's now enclosed batteries such as gel or AGM, where that technology is changed to reduce exposure, again, focusing on safety of workers. Now, this slide is represented within the sustainability industry on many different levels, and I just want to translate it into the cleaning world because that's who we are and that's what we do. The social component of sustainability is again, focusing on occupant wellness and worker safety. The economic benefit is the source reduction of consumables like paper, trash can liners, reducing plastic footprints, increasing productivity through focusing on safety, and then lowering operating costs. On an environmental aspect, again, it's water conservation, potentially energy conservation, looking at natural resources while reducing waste. So we can take the sustainability element of these three emerging components and translate them into the products that we use, the waste that we can produce, and ways in which we can conserve. So people will ask me, they'll say, well, how do we conserve energy? We're just the cleaning department. Well, the EPA building here in Denver where I live, it's contract cleaned, but it's contract cleaned during the day. And I can tell you in running those numbers that the day cleaning of that operation saves the taxpayers about $80,000 to $100,000 in energy savings by moving to day cleaning. So some of the facilities that really were lead buildings that really wanted to go green actually moved from night cleaning to day cleaning, ran a number on the BTU consumption, the number of hours of time that they had to leave the lights on in a facility for the cleaning crew, and they were able to come up with a pretty significant number. And so when people say, I need a compelling reason to do something, I normally want that compelling reason to have a financial component, a social component, and also an environmental component. Okay, these are the, let's call this NASCAR logos. These are the NASCAR logos that are around the green world. Now, there are many different green organizations, and I'm sure that my slide deck here can't represent all of them. But these are the primary ones that are embedded in the SIMS Green Building Standard and also in the U.S. Green Building Council requirements. And so let's start up in the left-hand corner. Green Seal certifies chemicals, paper products. They also do windows, and they do parking lot paint for striping a parking lot. They have a pretty broad bandwidth. They're one of the most recognizable certification organizations. EGO logo was originally a Canadian government regulation, came into the U.S., was purchased by Underwriters Laboratory. Underwriters Laboratory also owns another certifier called GreenGuard. The federal government has EPA's Design for the Environment program, or DFE. That logo has changed, and this is the new logo called Safer Choice. They're not really a certifying organization. They do have a standard. They do have an approval process for chemicals within the cleaning business. Now, some of the chemical manufacturers will use 1, 2, or all 3 of these certifying bodies, depending on how involved they are with government agencies or private industry. On the far right there at the top is what they call CARB, or the California Air Resources Board. The requirements for floor finish and the requirements for disinfectant is that they meet the requirements for the VOC regulations in both SIMS and in LEED. And so a lot of people don't read the print of the actual standard where I can use a disinfectant, and a disinfectant can be green if it meets the VOC requirements, and the manufacturer provides a letter to explain that. Same thing with floor finish. You don't have to use a green calcium-based floor finish. You can use a conventional floor finish that has zinc in it as long as it meets the California VOC requirements. In the middle of the screen, we have the Carpet and Rug Institute, and I had the privilege of sitting on that committee. They certify vacuum cleaners, interim maintenance carpet machines, and also carpet extractors. The Cal Recycle is one of the newer additions to the NASCAR logos here, is they now have the new requirements for post and pre-consumer waste for trash can liners. You also see companies like Kimberly-Clark that have forestry certifications, which is the FSC. There are 2 other forestry certifications for large print mills that print paper, that also manufacture toilet paper, hand towels, roll towels. There are some of the paper manufacturers that don't use Green Seal or Eco logo to certify their paper. And what they do is they have a logo that says EPA compliant, and that's the logo in the middle on the far right. And some people will say, well, it's not certified. I said it doesn't need to be certified. What it has to do is meet the requirements for EPA's post and pre-consumer waste. And there's a couple of documents for trash can liners and also for paper products. Then you have the APA organization, LEED, SIMS, and then the executive order for federal sites, which is the greening of government, which is the 13101, has some requirements. So all of these government agencies, certifying bodies, product certifiers, and associations are all involved in the green movement. Now, EPA has a hierarchy within our business, and I want to translate it because sometimes it can get a little technical. One is source reduction. Source reduction is simple. I'm going to move from 100 different chemicals to 5. That would be an example of source reduction. Another example of source reduction would be going from folded paper towels to roll paper towels. It's analyzing the usage of a specific item and seeing if we can reduce that usage through standardization, uniformity, or changing a product that is less wasteful within an organization. Sometimes an organization will look at their trash can liners and they'll say, well, those are overgauged and oversized. We want to reduce our footprint. That would be source reduction. That is the most inexpensive thing that anyone can do in this hierarchy. Now, the next level down is to reuse. So this would be something like vacuum cleaners, where I'm looking at the life cycle of a vacuum cleaner. So as an example, an upright vacuum cleaner in a commercial application may only have a life cycle of 2 years, maybe 3, whereas a backpack vacuum or a canister vacuum may have a life cycle of 5 or 6 years. And so if I have an auto scrubber as an example, and on the auto scrubber we're using data technology, and I know that Tennant has worked with the IRIS program, being able to identify when the machine needs to be maintained, when certain parts are wearing, not going beyond just having an hour meter on the machine. What I'm doing here is I'm extending the life cycle of something, and that falls into the reuse category. And last but not least is recycling, which can be expensive, whether it's single stream or whether it's multiple stream. We don't know what's happening at the collection level, but recycling and composting does have a financial return on the investment. Most universities, schools, and progressive buildings, airports, everybody has a waste diversion or a recycling program. What we also look at is when it comes to equipment, is what happens at the end of the life cycle. Are we just throwing those vacuum cleaners away, or in that specific community, is there somewhere where we can take those machines so that they can be disassembled and certain components can be recycled, whether it's a roto-mold tank on an auto scrubber? These are reclamation centers within the community. So this gives EPA's hierarchy and defines it as it relates to the products that we use. The environmental guidelines shorten down that logo list considerably, and so I just want to talk about this to gain some clarity as to who does what. The U.S. Green Building Council does not certify products, and it's not a government agency. It's voluntary, and a lot of people do it because it's good for marketing. It's good for their social responsibility. It attracts tenants. It also can enhance the building's value when it goes to be resold. It also can impact the operating cost of that building by lowering the operating cost. Most LEED buildings have about an 18 to 24-month return on their investment when they go through the actual process. The next one in the middle are the product certifiers, and this is Eco Logo, Green Seal, and the Carpet and Rug Institute. Again, these people are not government agencies. The DFE program on the far right is not a certification body. They actually have partnership programs with the chemical manufacturers, and they are a government agency. And so building certifiers, product certifiers, federal authority with a partnership program. Okay, chemical criteria. Let's go through the product pieces one by one, and then if you have questions at the end, I'll do my best to answer them. This represents, and without having a 30-page white paper, this represents the criteria as it related to many of the chemicals that came from the third-party certifiers. So anything that was a carcinogen, anything that affected reproductive systems, products that were combustible. Now, the DOT had a lot to do with removing those. Low dyes or no dyes in chemicals in some cases. Minimum VOC content that was related to the CARB standards. Some people said, look, we don't want zinc in our floor finish, even if it does meet the VOC requirements, and most of those finishes are what they call calcium-based finishes. There were also several manufacturers that made bio-based chemicals, which are chemicals that are made from corn and or citric acid, which is good at low levels for removing hard water deposits, which would be made of oranges or grapefruit or a food substance. These are regulated by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA. Recycled packaging, we saw bag-in-a-box. We saw people recycling their containers. Concentrates with dilution control centers. They removed phosphates years ago, biodegradable, something that's not affecting people's skin from a corrosive level. And then a lot of buildings that went green also, what they call fragrance-free buildings. A lot of people like fragrances, but some people can have negative reactions to those. When it comes to disinfectants and sanitizers, there's really a hierarchy of what we would consider to be risk factors. And so parasitic acid is one of the highest risk factors. This is mostly used in the food service industry. It's also used in healthcare to kill C. diff. It has like a 2 to 3 minute kill claim. But the chemical has such an overwhelming odor to it that it can be a respiratory irritant if I'm using it in an area where it's not ventilated. Bleach, which is the next level down, which is also recommended for killing certain types of germs, also is very corrosive to surfaces. It also can cause and trigger asthma. If you mix it with bleach or it gets mixed by accident with something else, it can create poisonous gas in buildings. I know that it's inexpensive, but it also can cause innumerable risk factors. Phenolics was primarily used in hospitals. It was a stronger grade of chemical than a quat. Many of the phenolics are being replaced by a parasitic acid or bleach wipes. Again, respiratory irritant. Then you've got your traditional quats, your hospital-grade quats, which require a 10-minute dwell time. Although they do kill aquatic life, they can be green if they meet the VOC levels. Then we see a new generation of EPA-registered peroxides, which also have a much lower dwell time, and they are on the acidic scale. So on the far right, one's more harmful, one is less harmful, depending on the type of facility that you're cleaning. Chemical systems. It's got to meet the criteria. Some people number and color code them. There's visual graphics for non-lingual graphics in these wall charts. I've seen some of Tennant's wall charts. There's no words on them. It's just icons and pictures to explain how to use an automatic scrubber as an example. Dispensing systems, foam trigger sprayers, flip-top caps. We also see cleaning with water, which is part of the Orbio system and the H2O system that I know that Tennant's been on the leading edge of innovation. There's a lot of universities and some school districts around the country that are using this not just to save money, but they're also using it for environmental purposes along with microfiber cloths and mops and other tools. This is an example of what those look like in the marketplace. Again, everybody has a different perspective on this. For 90% of the cleaning that we do in facilities, these work very well. They're adequate for the cleaning that we do. Most of the time I will see cleaning organizations who really like this for many different reasons. But this gives you, as far as the simplification, the health and safety, the environmental footprint, and then the total cost of cleaning. Chemicals are not an enormous cost, but I think a lot of people are looking at their environmental position and they're trying to come up with something that may be less impactful. Hand hygiene. Many of the manufacturers move to foam hand soap because it's easier to disperse within your hands. It also consumed less water. We also saw a lot of the automatic water devices, faucets within facilities. Foam dispensing can also reduce soap consumption. Low VOCs. I see a lot of policies around hand hygiene and occupant wellness. And then many of these dispensers have batteries and motors in them, and they're touch-free dispensers. You do have to watch the cartridges on these dispensers. Some of them are reusable, and over time, bacteria and soap and soil can build up on the bottoms of those tips, and that can be a point of germ transmission. I like to use the systems where I replace the cartridge and it replaces the tip all at the same time. They appear to be more sanitary in some ways. Microfiber cloths are still in the SIMS GB standard as a requirement. The LEED standard does not have microfiber in the most recent edition, but we believe that microfiber is a superior product. And we also believe that it has a long life cycle. So it doesn't kill germs, but it does remove the bacteria up to 95%. There are mops, there are mitts, there are flat mops, tube mops, traditional mops that may be blended with cotton or other synthetic materials. There's also a global color code for this. Red is for high-risk areas in restrooms. Yellow is for low-risk areas in restrooms and other areas like a science lab. Blue is for general purpose cleaning, and green is for food service operation. And so the color code helps divide the areas by risk, and it also becomes a great training tool. If you see a worker in a hallway with a red mop, you know that there may be germ transmission because they're taking soil from the bathroom into potentially into a hallway or a classroom. Okay, paper products. Source reduction on the paper products, I'm looking for 800 to 1,000 foot roll towels. It can be either a white perf, white, or a brown towel. Some operations will not use brown towels. Some people want to save some money in that category. You see the replacing of folded towels with roll towels can reduce waste by about 20% or higher. The touch-free dispensers have been around for a while. The issue is that some people don't like the batteries from an environmental perspective. And so people ask me, they said, well, can we get a touch-free dispenser without batteries? And you can. These are paper dispensers that will drop a 3-inch piece of paper that can be pulled. I mean, even a multi-fold towel drops a paper out of the dispenser so that you don't have to touch the dispenser itself. Also, the dispensers will allow you to adjust the length of the paper that comes out, whether it's an 8-inch piece or a 12-inch or a 16-inch piece of paper, so that you can control the amount of paper that the occupant is using to dry their hands. We also see high-capacity toilet tissue dispenser. There's also coreless toilet tissue dispensers. If you look at your leading paper manufacturers, they're doing everything they can to focus on source reduction and the reduction of waste within this area because it's a pretty significant area. About 55% of all custodial operations, their product costs are related to paper, towels, tissue, hand soap is right in that area of around 50 to 55%. These are the two documents from the Environmental Protection Agency that verify the numbers on post and pre-consumer waste for trash can liners and paper. We simplified it by putting it into a graph. So this gives you the minimum for post and pre-consumer waste. So pre-consumer waste would be, I'll give you an example. Tennant is manufacturing auto scrubbers. The auto scrubbers are made with rotomold tanks. When they build a rotomold tank, the tank is circular and it'll have a hole in the top. Then they have a machine, an overhead router. That overhead router cuts out the tank and puts a clean edge on that tank for you to pour water into. They would take that material, they would put it in a recycling bin, recycle it, and reuse it in the manufacturing process, or send it downstream and let somebody else recycle it for use in another manufacturing process. Post-consumer waste is that we printed a magazine. You read that magazine, and then you throw the magazine into a recycling bin. And that's the difference between post-consumer, pre-consumer waste. Now, these are the minimums that come out of those two documents, minimums and maximums for paper products and also trash can liners. So what we see in the field is we see there's a lot of things that happen in the plastics business. And so when we go in, we take digital photos, and what we see is trash can liners that are sometimes 12 to 24 inches hanging over the side of the can. And they're not the right thickness. They might be zippering. They're breaking. So primarily what we do here is we have to have liners in trash cans because of the soil and the water and everything that we're doing. And washing trash cans daily is not cost effective. And so what we really want to do here is do right sizing, right gauging, and making sure that we have the right bag for the right container and the right bag for the right type of soil. So in offices, high-density liners, not a problem. In a cafeteria, I need something that's going to hold weight. I need something that's puncture-resistant, and I need something that's going to hold moisture. I see people pouring, half a can of pop into a trash can. I can't have an adequate liner in an area like that where I have extreme soil. These are your specifications for trash can liners in addition to what EPA had outlined. And so what happened is that a lot of the manufacturers went back to the U.S. Green Building Council and said, hey, if we manufacture a bag with a lot of recycled content, we have to make it thicker to make it perform. And so they came up with some gauge thickness requirements as it related to plastic post-consumer material that was being used. And they were able to get the specification changed, and then the Cal Recycle organization came in and wrote some specifications for trash can liners. I would have to say that about 50% of all the cleaning products that are used within most of your organizations are used and consumed in restrooms. And so green restrooms are not overly complicated, but this has the highest level of complaints, the least amount of square footage, 20% of the overall labor or activity, and you can create a green cleaning system for restrooms. Everything from the paper to the liners to the chemicals to the urinal blocks, you can do an assessment and say, okay, we're going to start here in this area because this is where the consumption is. You also see there are low VOC air care dispensers, low impact disinfectants, and the machine that you see in this slide is one of my favorites because it is what I consider to be the best practice for doing grout restoration. These are 1,000 PSI machines that almost look like carpet extractors. You can also use it as a multi-surface cleaner in a restroom, but the machine, the accessory to the right of that, has a jet bar on it, and these machines clean grout like I've never seen before. And we have a lot of clients where they struggle with cleaning grout and the chemicals in the enclosed space. These are probably one of the quickest ways to bring grout up to maintainable standard, and we classify that as one of the best practices. Entryway systems, these are critical to reducing soil in buildings. It also extends the life of floor finish. Most of the time when we see a problem or a high soil level or somebody's having an issue with their floor finish, we usually want to see the entrances to see if they have a preventative form of maintenance and the right length of mats. The right length of mat, according to the Carpet and Rug Institute, should be 10 feet long. So it can be a 4 by 10 or a 4 by 20, but it's all based on footfalls. A 10-foot mat has 3 footfalls. A 20 would probably have 6 to 8 footfalls to absorb moisture and to remove grit. I also like the multi-level matting that the industry seems to have accepted. I think the primary name of multi-level matting seems to be Water Hog, was one of the trademark names of one of the companies. These are your next to a brute container, these are the second most popular waste receptacles, which is called a Slim Jim in our industry, but they also come in colors, and they also have about a half a dozen different decks or lids and stickers for those lids. And so our friends at Rubbermaid do a pretty good job with recycling containers, as do some other companies. And so they also have audit forms, and they have recommendations. So some of the companies that don't just make recycling containers, they have some resource documents for you. They're trying to, divert 50% of the waste stream, and these are some of the requirements, but you may have somebody who's part of your health, safety, and environmental department, and there may be different targets or different goals for actual waste reduction and recycling. These devices are for water conservation. I certainly don't recommend these for a K-12 school, but I do see them in Class A office buildings. I do see them in certain universities. You've got to be careful of vandalism, but they've been in our business now for almost 25 years, and they have a lot of utility. Nobody wants to touch anything in a high-risk area. These also can reduce water within facilities, as well as giving that facility a no-touch look and feel. Many people are looking at alternatives to their floor care programs. Some of the architects are putting in polished concrete. They're putting in hospitals, we're seeing more no finish or rubber floors. But there are some sustainability components to this. What I look for is I look for a 24 to 36 month life cycle on the right floor care program. So I would rather see a zinc floor finish that has the durability factor that meets the VOC requirements than potentially a green finish that requires it to be stripped once a year or even more frequently than that. And so I look at it, floors are, no one likes stripping floors. It's very physical, it can be disruptive to buildings, and I believe that a green floor is a floor that has a long life cycle and that's an attractive looking floor. The auto scrubbers do have specifications. Now there is not a third-party certification for auto scrubbers, but the SIMS GB standard and the LEED standard have given some specifications to auto scrubbers to make them more sustainable. So safeguards for around the squeegees, you see wheels around the perimeter of a parabolic floating squeegee. You see rubber around the actual head of this particular scrubber. You also see roto-mold tanks. At one time they had stainless steel skins on them, which could cause asset damage within buildings. Ergonomic design, reduced vibration. Many of these auto scrubbers now have a lot of insulation around the vacuum motors to reduce the noise potential within a facility. Most of them hover under 70 dB. Environmentally preferred batteries have been expanded for gels, absorbed glass mat or AGMs, or we're seeing an entire generation of lithium-ion batteries coming in, and there are some battery-powered vacuum cleaners on the marketplace. Auto scrubber machines can have variable speed pumps for the actual solution that they put down, depending on the forward speed and the type of soil. They can have onboard chemical metering, or they can use a dilution control system like a dip tube, a portion control packet, or a dilution control center mounted on the wall. Also, the ECO, the H2O system, also has the ability to not use chemical, where you're using electrically activated water into the auto scrubber that's built into the scrubber itself. And so you have a lot of options as to the characteristics that you might be looking for. If you say, look, I'm looking for a green automatic scrubber or an automatic scrubber that meets these green requirements. The Carpet and Rug Institute covers 3 basic areas. These are uprights, canisters, batteries, and wide area vacuums. They also have a certification for large battery-powered sweepers for carpeting as well. And so being on this committee for 5 years while they were developing the test chambers and the standards, it was based on soil recovery, the filtration of the vacuum cleaner, because a worker is operating within 18 inches of the vacuum handle and the bag. And so some people would say, well, vacuum cleaners don't make you sick. And I looked at this woman one time and I said, well, that's because you're not vacuuming. The average cleaning worker is vacuuming between 2-3 hours a day. The average homeowner only vacuums about 20 minutes a week if they vacuum at all. And so the exposure to a commercial worker was very high, which is why the standard required a filtration system and a measurement of particulate that was being emitted from the vacuum cleaner in that test chamber. And then the appearance carpet retention was based on the notion that vacuum cleaners had to have beater bars. Well, vacuum cleaners that had beater bars sometimes could hurt the carpet fiber and cause it to wear out quickly. And then the tests proved that some of the tribal practices in vacuum cleaner design was untrue to its actual performance. And so the standards are available for, and again, if anybody on this call wants the standards for Green Seal, UL, EPA, the Carpet and Rug Institute, for any of these categories, we house a lot of those standards. We would be happy to get them to the management team at Tennant. They could forward them to you. There is also a standard for carpet extractors. This, again, is based on how is that extractor affecting the appearance of the carpeting and the actual soil and water recovery. Then there are 3 levels, bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. And this is for self-contained extractors, ride-on extractors, and box extractors with wands. And there happens to be a carpet cleaning machine that's a rider. These are interim maintenance machines. This happens to be a production rate of potentially 20 to 30,000 square feet per hour, whereas a traditional carpet machine might have a production rate that would be half of that. So depending on the size of your buildings, riders have application just from the ease of use along with productivity. This is the newest standard from the Carpet and Rug Institute. Again, this is looking at encapsulation, soil suspension systems. It's also looking at the pH of the chemical, no optical brighteners that can have a negative effect on the carpeting. And so these standards are something that a lot of people lean towards. Some of the carpet mills and manufacturers recommend that the product be certified, and we normally look for what was the criteria when a sustainability manager begins to ask questions about what they're using. Ultra-high-speed floor machines, again, no certification, but there is a specification, 70 dB or less. If you're using propane machines, 90 dB or less. This machine is a machine for the U.S. market. It runs on 110. If I was in a European market, you might see a vacuum cleaner mounted to the handle. There is a soil capture system at the back of this ultra-high-speed burnisher that would move at, let's say, 2,000 RPMs. And then there's a shroud around the perimeter. The drive block has fins mounted to it, which creates airflow, and this reduces airborne particulate when burnishing by probably 50%. There is a compelling reason to get sustainability and a policy as part of your operation. There are benefits to contractors, school districts, in-house service providers. And there's enough evidence to prove that whether it be for the environmental reasons, the social reasons, or the economic reasons, that there are compelling reasons why organizations should take their cleaning departments down this initiative. Okay, I'll wrap this up with 3 simple things: a site-based assessment, recommendations, and implementation and measurement are the 3. So 1, what are our goals? Do we have a policy or not? Do we have the means of assessing our product consumption? Do we have overlapping products? Do we have a green cleaning training program for frontline workers and supervisors? Recycling and containers. What does our floor and carpet program look like? What kind of equipment are we using? Do we have green restrooms or not? Do we have a hand hygiene program to focus on occupant wellness and worker safety? And then do we have the right type of entrance mat system in place? These would be just a few of the things that we would assess if we came into your organization to look at its sustainable footprint. Then we look at it is submitting the assessment with the findings, what products were third-party certified and which ones were not, focusing on source reduction, focusing on best practices and procedures, and at the same time looking for opportunities to enhance the appearance of our building. Then who are the third-party resources if a sustainability manager wants to see the actual standards or documents, and then any educational materials to improve the procedures to make them safer and more sustainable. And last but not least is the implementation, which is identifying who is the champion for the department, what is the timeline to transition the facility, looking at which buildings are going to be part of the conversion first. Sometimes we have to change out dispensers, whether it's towel, tissue, soap, or chemicals. Many of you may have already done that. Then the actual training, and then looking at and measuring it every 6 months to make sure that everybody's focused and that the program has a sense of purpose. And the other element is that you got to blow your own horn. Once you go down this road, then you can communicate to the student body, to the local newspaper. You might have some type of green day where you're looking at ways in which to recognize your staff and also the efforts that you made to have a sustainable cleaning department.